now we can see that we have our mix session. And the way that I make this, by the way, a couple of things. One, I always export each individual track. Always, always, always. I find it's really important to not make groups when you go into making your mix session, because if you have a group of percussion and one particular sound in the percussion group is causing issues, well, now you have to kind of EQ the whole group, and maybe you're gonna affect another part of the percussion that you didn't intend to. So I really believe in exporting each track individually. So I do that, export all tracks, and then I import everything, and now I rebuild the mix session. And when I first bring it in, everything kind of looks like this track here, right? You see the vocal track, and I should be using this. So it's kind of just one long track, right? Because you get all the silence and everything else in between, which can be a little bit disconcerting at first, but you kind of get used to it after a while. But as you can see, I've gone in and I've made quite a lot of edits even still here. So even in the mix session, you'll still see that I've made changes, I've made variations. Everything's now rendered to audio, so I now have complete control over every single sound, including the returns, right? So including like the reverb return, and I can slice this and I can adjust the volume in just this particular section, or the delay, for instance, or I can add other effects to it. In fact, like an LFO tool. So I have an LFO tool now, which is processing just that return channel to give it more pump and more groove. So there's all these kind of little tricks and things that I can do. I went and decided that I needed another snare layer because the snare wasn't hitting the way that I wanted it to. So let's take a quick listen and just hear how this is sounding. So you could hear immediately what a difference that snare made. It really brought it out. Another thing that I realized after the fact was that I had a bad kick. I did not like the kick from the original track, so I replaced it. That was my original kick. It sounded okay, but after I actually did my mix and then made a master, and I was referencing it against other tracks, I realized my kick just was not up to speed. It was just weak and wimpy and flabby and not punchy and tight. So I replaced it with this kick, which, as you can hear, has got a lot more cojones. So in the context of the mix, if I go between these two kicks, which I'll do right now, hear how it sounds. It's night and day, it's no contest. So that's one of the things that I like. It's kind of a psychological element of this mix session, but it's a chance to second guess all your work. It's a chance to go through kind of with a fine-tooth comb and say, do I really like this? Is this really perfect? Or was it just getting me through in the composition phase? Is this sound exactly the sound that I want? And you can go through and have just kind of another chance to really be sure that you like it and before you commit to it. Because I think one of the things when we're composing, and I think this is actually a good thing and important, but we tend to go quickly, and we should go quickly because it's all about getting into flow. When you're composing, you gotta get into a flow, because it's through that flow and that trance-like state that you become one with your session, that you connect and just let whatever's inside of you flow out and connect and get recorded and get put down. And I think it's important to do that process and not second guess things too much, because if you start second guessing things, then you get stuck, you get into a rut and you don't move forward. So I think it's important to just keep that train in motion. So that's good, but then now we're here, now we're in the mix session, so now we have a chance to really go through and reevaluate those choices. More automation, right? So I decided with this particular sound, with the way that it was in the mix, it sounded a bit too abrupt when it just came in, so I decided to add a filter to it. And then once the drop hits, then it kind of it opens up completely, and now we get the full impact of the sound. That's my signature sound, by the way. I love that sound. So yeah, so that's something that I got a chance to really evaluate. And then if we go and we look at the bass, now we can see, actually I've done a couple of things. One, I've created a bass group here. So we've got two different elements to the bass now. By the way too, notice how much more even this looks. See how even this bass line is? So that is really, really good. So I went through and what I did was I sliced up each individual bass note, just like this, slice, and then I go in and I adjust each individual clip gain. And I do that to level out the notes so that it sounds nice and even and consistent. Because you want a bass line that's consistent, right? You don't want it jumping around all over the place. You really, the bass and the kick are like the foundation of the track, and you really want them to be really tight and just reliable, right? You don't want any surprises. But so what I did was I kind of divided this into like more of a low bass. And then we have here, that's more, and I high passed it. So you're just getting the mid and the upper frequencies. And by doing that, I was able to put this one in mono, have this one more in stereo, layer them together. And it was originally the same bass. I'm just processing them differently. And then now when we solo it, we hear the two of them together. So that I found was much easier to control than the original bass from the original song. And then on top of that, I discovered that I needed a third layer. So actually you can see I've got some MIDI here, because even in the mix session, I went and did some more composition work because, again, through that process of second guessing, I realized that it needed something to really make it pop. My bass line wasn't cutting through the mix quite enough because my mix is very dense, very full, and so I needed to add another layer. So now I have, so let's get all three of these going. And that really, really, really made it pop. So if we unsolo these and listen to them in the context of the mix, cool, just wanted to let you hear that for a minute so you can kind of get a feel for how this mix sounds different than the original composition section. So my very, very last piece of advice, there's a lot more that I could talk about, but as you guys may or may not know, I teach a full online mixing and mastering class in Ableton Live. So absolutely, if you want to go deep on mixing and mastering, sign up for that class because we go through all of it. But the very last thing that I really want to mention to you guys, which I think will really help, is that you use reference tracks. In the session, in the context of the session. You start A-Bing, suddenly you'll realize, whoa, my mix is way off and I need to get it on spec. I like to say on spec. And so this is something that I do all the time. I always use reference tracks, and I'll just show you here, right at the top. I've got 4 reference tracks in this session. One of them is a reference track that I really like from Sunburn, because it's kind of a similar style that I'm going for. So, and I really was quite impressed by his mix on this particular tune. And then the other 3 tracks are actually previous tracks of my own that I spent a lot of time on, and I made, really, I put a lot of work into, and they are my sound, they are my sound. So I like to reference my new song against my old songs to make sure that I'm maintaining that consistency from track to track to track. And then obviously if I go and play a live set and have all my songs playing together, I wanna make sure that as we go from one to the next, A, it sounds consistent, B, it sounds like me. So that's very important. So I have these in my set, and typically I'll have this hooked up to a crossfader. But yeah, just make sure that you get your reference tracks in there, and I'll just show you really quick. So.
Baby, hold on to me.
So that's just basically it. Just being able to A/B. Obviously, you want to make sure that the amplitude is at the same level. Otherwise, you're not going to get a fair comparison. But that's basically it. So there you go. There's my tip. And again, if you are skipping the beginning or just got here at the end somehow to just consolidate it into one final boom, bada bing, my tip is this. Always, always, always convert everything to audio and make a separate mix session. Do not mix in your composing section, in your composition section. Make that extra effort, spend the extra time, and it will pay off dividends. Thank you guys so much. This is Liam Shai here with Pyramind. See you next time.